This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and my guest today is Dr. Lisa Piercey, a physician, investor, and former Tennessee Commissioner of Health. In her new book, Natural Born Entrepreneurs, she shares how she left corporate healthcare to build and grow small businesses, offering lessons for anyone ready to take ownership of their career. Dr. Lisa Piercey, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Joe.
So I got to ask you, when I speak to a lot of physician entrepreneurs, I often have I ask this question all the time, and physicians always give me the same answer. So I want to see if you're going to give me the same answer. Because a lot of times when people go to medical school, they complete their undergrad, they do their training, and then all of a sudden they're done with decades and decades of training, and then they're told, okay, go run a business or go run an office. And most doctors are like, huh? You never told me anything about that. And often when I ask doctors about this, they'll say, there's no time. There's no time to talk about how to, build an Excel spreadsheet and hire an accountant and get the front of the office all together. There's no time for that in medical school. So tell me about how that was with you. Was it similar to you where basically when you got out and you're like, oh God, now what do I do? And I know you got the MBA and we're going to get into all that later, but tell me about that like business piece along with your medical journey.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. And you're absolutely right. Physicians do not learn anything about business in medical school. And I would submit that a lot of them don't want to know.
Okay.
Until they do. And it's sort of how my interest in business began, because my first job out of residency was in a large for-profit, multi-specialty group. And I was paid based on productivity. I had a very small base salary and a large upside as far as, how much and how hard I worked. And so I figured that compensation model, I figured it out inside and out. What levers to pull, which were the high value activities, which were not. And lo and behold, I was learning business in all of that because, my income relied on that. Now, what I hear physicians saying a lot is, I don't want to mess with the business side of things. I just want to practice medicine. And I get that because particularly in medicine today, with the advent of EMRs and all of the different documentation tools and requirements, physicians and providers find themselves more and more commonly spending time in front of a computer, spending time in front of a keyboard and a camera, as opposed to patients, which is what got us into the industry to begin with.
So tell me about that turning point when you decide to make the jump from corporate healthcare to pursue business ownership. You just said you didn't know anything from Adam. You were learning on the job at that corporate job. So what was the moment that finally said, I've got enough information. I've kind of sharpened my tools and I kind of know a little bit about business to be dangerous. Tell me what was the turning point there?
I'm going to have a very unexpected answer for you, and it's not applicable to anyone else.
Okay.
I got an MBA instead of having a fifth child. Okay. And so, because I was getting very interested in the business side of things, and that was familiar to me because I come from a full family of entrepreneurs. In fact, I was the only person in my family who had ever not worked for themselves or within the family. I was the only one. I remember when I first heard the phrase, maybe in college or medical school, somebody in the family said, oh, you're going to work for the man. And I'm like, what man? Anyway, I didn't realize that, that wasn't a common thing in our family. And so my entire childhood, I was raised in my parents' businesses, my grandparents' businesses. And so that mindset was always there. And then so when you combine that with the context of me sort of having to figure this out on my own to make my own incentives and compensation work, I thought, yeah, I could put these two things together. So the idea of blending healthcare and business was germinating in my head. And, in retrospect, it's funny, but it was very real at the time. I'd been in practice 3 years, 4 years. I was kind of top producer, doing well, winning the awards, but I just really wasn't that fulfilled. And what I thought is, oh, I need one more child. And the funny or ironic part is I'd had a 3-year-old and a set of newborn triplets. And so I had 4 kids ages 3 and under. And I thought, well, maybe I just need one more child. And my husband promptly told me I needed a hobby. And so I thought, yeah, I do need something to kind of keep my hands busy right now. And that was when kind of the term executive MBA started coming to the forefront. This would have been plus or minus 2010. And so I was able to find a program that I could manage on the evenings and on the weekends. And so I honestly just did it for the intellectual stimulation, to keep my hands busy and to scratch an itch that I really wasn't sure what it was. And then when I did get in there, I thought, yeah, this makes a whole lot of sense. And that's when I ultimately made the leap into full-time business.
Wow. If I had a dollar for every time someone chose an MBA instead of a fifth child, I would be a rich man right now, Lisa. Let me tell you. But it's funny, how kids talk about vibe. The vibe I got from reading the early parts of your book was stifled. You were stifled in that corporate. Can you give me an example of what that's, because you lived it. So like for someone who is not in that system, what's stifling about being part of like the ecosystem of corporate healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And, I want to preface this by saying there are a lot of industries, and medicine is one of them, where change is not always a good thing. Innovation is a good thing, but there are some industries, particularly in medicine, you want your doctor, you want your healthcare provider to back up with years and years of data and science before you, make a decision or make a change. And that's fine in clinical medicine. But when you get to the business of healthcare, you sit there and you go, I think I could probably figure out a better way to do this. Not that I'm smarter, not that you're not smart, whoever's making this decision, but I'm here on the ground and I can see that this might turn out differently if we could pull this lever or if we could pursue this path. And likewise, the larger corporation you get in, the more bureaucracy. So you get these layers and layers of decision points, small p political decisions, and you start to think, I'm just part of this big machine. And that's fine for a lot of people. In fact, that's fine for the majority of people. But for those of us who have that entrepreneurial itch, it was incredibly stifling. And I just felt like I kept hitting my head on the ceiling and thinking, there's a lot of comfort in this job. I don't have to worry about it when I go home because it's not mine. I mean, it's going to be there tomorrow. And if I make a mistake, okay, fine. We can clean that up. And so it was also stifling from a growth standpoint because I knew I would just be on this hamster wheel and it would just keep going and going. And so I wanted to get off of that. And I wanted to have something that was my own. And that was not only the upside, because there was also a part of me, and this, it might seem a bit paradoxical, but there was also a part of me that didn't enjoy not, I got a lot of double negatives there. I didn't enjoy not having risk. So I wanted more risk. I wanted more at stake. And like I said, that sounds so counterintuitive because like, oh, why would you want more risk? Well, because when you push through risk and you grow through those things, you own it. And I wanted the highs and the lows to come along with it. And when you're in a big corporate job, it's just kind of steady Eddie.
Now, before we get into the entrepreneurship part of your journey, I'd like to ask, and almost like kind of devil's advocate, what you were kind of going through, because you mentioned this word risk. You've got 4 children. You're thriving in healthcare. Did you have anyone in your life saying, Lisa, what are you doing? What do you mean risk? You're not some swinging single 20-year-old girl on this, living her best life. You have a lot going on. Did that? Pardon me if no one ever said that to you, but I was curious. Did that happen?
Well, the loudest person who said that was myself. And the
Wow.
question of, wow, is this selfish to want to do something different? Because I have a nice job. I get a nice paycheck. It's very predictable. I know how to do it. And wouldn't it just be a better parent, wife, community member, daughter, what fill in the blank, if you just kind of sat real still and maybe when the kids are out of school and maybe then you can go do your thing. And I just couldn't do it. So yes, people said that to me. People but no one said it louder than I did.
Hmm.
And the way people said it to me, I'll be honest, it every time somebody said something, I thought, am I doing this wrong? Because how that phrase usually came out to me, or that sentiment usually came out to me, is, oh, you spent a long time and a whole lot of money getting that physician degree. Why would you want to give that up? And, to me, it was never giving it up. It was building on top of it. And perhaps that's also the reason I was comfortable taking that risk. And we kind of joke about it in the house, but we're like, well, mom could always go back to being a real doctor.
Yeah.
And so, and I did. I did know that I could always go back, and I kept my license up. I kept seeing patients. I still see patients in a very limited capacity just to keep my clinical skills up. So I knew I had that fallback. And so that mitigated the risk some in my mind.
I love that. It's so funny to say. I just recently, a friend of mine was I think she was um, a trauma nurse, and she hooked up with a guy, and the guy's like, "Hey, listen, if you want to take a break, I'll support you. I'll take care of you." And she basically left her job as a nurse, and now she's kind of like traveling, having a blast. And I would and we talk about it, and she's like, "Yeah, if this doesn't work out with the guy I'm with, or if I'm not happy, I'll just fall back into medicine." And so you're like the second person in like a matter of months who have medicine as a fallback option. It's not something you hear often, but I've heard it twice in the past few months. It's funny.
I maybe it's just me, but I'm seeing a lot of people do things outside of their original career plan. And now that I have 4 college students of my own,
Wow.
we're sort of talking about how do you build a foundation that can launch you in several different directions, but you can always come back to kind of this central core skill set and profession and start over if you need to. And so, like I said, I think it feels like sometimes you're doing it wrong because I did make a very large financial and time investment, as well as emotional and intellectual investment in becoming a physician. But I don't think I would be where I am now had I not had that foundation.
Yeah, it's almost like the sunk cost fallacy can apply to human beings. The sunk cost fallacy is like if something's not working, just keep throwing more money into it because it's like you're playing poker, you're pot committed. You could have done that too. You could be like, okay, I'll just keep doing this and just pouring more into it. But then at the end of the day, you feel empty inside. And so you filled that with a lot of different things. And before we get to the entrepreneurship part of it, you were also a commissioner of health in Tennessee during a wonderful time to do so during the pandemic. So I don't want to get off too astray here, but tell me about that time as a commissioner of a health care system while you're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, my timing is just impeccable. Maybe I'm really, really lucky. But the journey to that was I've always had a passion for health policy and been reasonably politically active. And so I was getting a pretty big footprint in the rural hospital space, which from a health policy standpoint was and actually still is a very hot topic. And so we got a new governor in Tennessee at the time who ran on a platform of rural issues, but not healthcare, economic development, workforce. And so all of those paths aligned, and I felt very passionate about joining the cabinet to work on not only rural health issues, but all public health issues. And in fact, for the first 14 months, we had a great time working on that. Rural hospitals and dental care for the uninsured. And that was still when the opioid epidemic was very, very front of mind. It still is, but it was very front of mind then. And so we had a great 14 months, and then the pandemic came. And so the last 3 years essentially of that term were pandemic focused. And of course, none of us could have predicted that. And I'll tell you, the statistic, I want to say something like 35 or possibly even 38 of the state health officials out of 50 states turned over during that first year. It was an incredibly difficult time. And that's not to say they did anything wrong, but you'll recall it was very polarizing. Some of my colleagues were in grave danger, and had a lot of threats and threats to their family. I was fortunate I did not have that here in Tennessee, but there was a decision point. Some weeks, months into the pandemic, this is not what I signed up for. This is not why I left my nice corporate hospital administrative job to come do this. But I was raised in a family who taught you, yeah, sometimes it's hard and you're going to just have to push through it. And you're going, you made a commitment to do this and you're going to stick it out. And so, in that context, with a boss, the governor, who was incredibly supportive, very collegial, we were able to talk about things openly. So I felt supported. And so I was able to push through with that. I will tell you, I don't wish that on my worst enemy, and I hope it never happens again. But I'm thankful for that experience.
Wow. All right. If I don't want to get off too far on a tangent here, but it is a weird time to be in medicine, right? I can only imagine. Just starting from the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I'm sure things were not hunky dory, but it wasn't as, I guess, complicated, for lack of a better word. And now we're getting into this world where healthcare and politics are almost interwoven. And I, as a Gen Xer, have never remembered a time like this until the pandemic happened, and now it's just gotten worse. Without getting into the quote unquote too political of it all, as someone who has a physician background, worked in a public position, how weird is it for you to see how political medicine has gotten?
I'm with you in the Gen X category, Joe. So I likewise. Not only I never saw that, I never even contemplated that. And I think about not only where my head was at the beginning of the pandemic, but also I look back at many of the press conferences we did. And initially, when I started getting some of this more political pushback, maybe things that weren't as data driven, I thought, oh, I'm not giving enough data here, because I assumed that people, just the general public, made decisions like a scientist makes decisions, and physicians consider themselves scientists, which is, if I know the data that you're talking about and I know the assumptions and the environment under which it was made, we can, if we have a reasonably similar education and background, we're probably going to come to a pretty similar, spot in conclusion. And then if the data changes and we can all do it, then we can change our opinion altogether. And so initially I thought, oh, I'm not giving enough data. So I just need to give more data to these people, the lay public, and they'll come around. And that wasn't it. And then I thought, well, maybe I need to get a little more serious about this and say it a little tougher, a little stronger, a little meaner, and maybe then they'll take me seriously. And that wasn't it either. And it came to this thing, maybe the biggest learning of all of my tenure is that facts don't change people's minds, which was a premise that I had never contemplated and is still kind of hard to wrap my head around it. What people believe is how they fit into their tribe. Not, and you can define that tribe however you want to. Political tribe, racial tribe, geographic tribe, whatever it is, they're people. They would rather fit in with that group of people than go out on a limb and say, I don't think that's right, because then they're going to be ostracized. And so I think that's what we saw is a tribalism, a polarization, to where if I'm going to continue preserving my identity as fill in the blank, whatever it is, then I'm going to have to subscribe to that. And you know what? There's enough doubt and there's enough different points of view and information floating around here that is probably right anyway. And so I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what physicians are going through now. I mean, we're recording this shortly after the whole Tylenol thing, and we're not going to go into it now, but it just continues and continues. And how about this? Do you see it getting better, or do you think it's just or we're just gonna now live in this world of where medicine and politics are just kind of intertwined forever, Lisa?
I hope that they're not, but I can't see a path where they decouple from one another. And a lot of that, and I'm not criticizing it, but a lot of it is changed by the fact of where people get their information and the sources of information that they trust. And I certainly subscribe to the mentality that more information and ready information is better, and it's better for our society if it's accurate information. And what I think has trouble getting out there is, the signal from the noise. And how do people who are just lay people with no medical training, how do they parse through it? It's tough to figure out.
All right, well, let's move on to some better and brighter and healthier
Okay,
things to
good.
talk about. Yes, but thank you for indulging me there, Lisa. And so I want to get into this idea of you write about entrepreneurship through acquisition, ETA. Yeah, acronym. You came from healthcare where it's a world of acronyms, and you did the MBA process, so you love your good old acronyms. So tell me about that, and I guess let's start with your first, and I kind of introduce you into this world of ETAs.
Sure. Yeah. So I did what I thought everybody did and was supposed to do when they felt stifled in their corporate job is, oh, I'll launch a startup, right? Because I want to do my own thing. I want to be my own boss. So fine, I'll launch my own startup. And for a lot of people coming out of government and having, business experience, a consulting firm is a pretty natural next step. And several of my friends had done that when they left government. So that's what I did. And it was very successful for the first few months. And then after about 6 months, I thought, wait, I am still trading my time for money. And if I don't put in the time, then I don't make the money. This business, this startup is dependent upon me. And I wanted to separate those things where there could be income without me having to directly spend my time. And so I thought, well, maybe I should start a different company that with a product and a service, and I can hire all these people. I'm sure that would have been okay. A, if I had an idea, which I did not. And B, if I were 26 and didn't really have a lot of responsibilities. But at this point, I think the kids were all in high school. All four kids were in high school and heading into college. And, we've got a mortgage and we have a lifestyle that we enjoy. And so there wasn't a scenario where I could see I'm just going to start from scratch and I'm going to have a few years of scarcity. And there are people who do that. And man, I'll give them a big high five because they do it and many of them do it very well. Also, many startups fail. Maybe that's a different topic. But for me, I thought, well, I can't do that. And so I need to own my own business and became familiar with, well, how do you do that? Because I'd actually done some real estate investing, had done a lot of angel investments in startups, but I had no idea how to buy a business. And just that was kind of rolling around in my head. And an investor friend of mine one day asked me if I'd ever heard of a search fund. And I said, I sure have not. And so I remember going home from that lunch meeting and immediately Googling it and learning about it. And I thought, that makes sense to me. So I did a lot of reading about it. I talked to some other folks, but there was not a lot of people who had done it. So I ended up partnering with an institutional fund. They were actually based out of Switzerland, but had a large North American presence. And they ran almost like an accelerator program. That's my word, not theirs. But supported, and in exchange for a small piece of ownership, they helped me through that legal process and the diligence process and the fundraising process. And lo and behold, that's how I did my first acquisition, through a traditional search fund. And then I had so much fun, I did it a couple other ways myself.
Wow, that's awesome. And what was the first acquisition? Can you share that one? And how did it go?
Yeah,
I guess.
sure. The first one was a specialty pharmacy, and it is down in Mississippi. And, when I was first talking to the broker about it, he said, well, I've got this pharmacy. He said, I'm not sure you like the geography, but it is in the South. I said, what? Just try me. And he said, it's in Mississippi. I said, oh, yeah, that's my kind of place. And so I wanted to be within driving distance of our home in Tennessee. And so went down there, and it's a great scalable business model. So I like the business model in general. But what I particularly liked about it, and this has become a theme in all of my acquisitions, is that there was a mission component to it. It was helping to solve a problem that I saw in corporate America and in corporate healthcare and in public healthcare, which are barriers to access. This one in particular helps to overcome the barrier of transportation. It helps to overcome the barrier of affordability. And so not only was I able to acquire a business that has done and Lord willing will continue to do very well from a growth standpoint, but it also helps me fulfill a mission that I always kind of wanted to do anyway.
Wow, that's great. That's so cool to hear. All right, so you mentioned why you like that business, and you've done it a few times. You've been to the rodeo a couple times. What are some key traits when it comes to these small businesses? Because that was sort of in your bag. It was in the South. It had to do with healthcare, so it's not like it was completely foreign to you. But in terms of like traits for what are these small businesses you'd like to invest in or acquire, does any come to mind?
Sure. One is a very practical kind of technicality, which is how much profit is already there. I want a business that is already profitable, that if I did absolutely nothing to it, if it looked exactly the same in 5 years as it did today, that's okay. We'll still be making a profit. We'll still be doing well. Saying that a different way, I I don't do dumpster fires. I don't do turnarounds. I like something that the base case is profitable and I can add upside to it. And if I did nothing, it would still be okay. That not only helps support a base of growth, but it also helps, kind of absorb mistakes. Anytime there's a transition, there's going to be, in fact, there's a name for it. It's called the J curve. You kind of go down before you go up, and having that profitability cushions for that. The pediatrician in me likens that to an adolescent business. So I don't like very young businesses, and I don't like fully mature businesses that don't have room to grow. I like that sort of adolescent sweet spot. They know how to act. They've got bones. They can be left alone. But if you give them a little maturity, you put some processes in place, then you can really grow them. And then, the other characteristic that I like, and frankly, I see a lot of folks in healthcare struggle with this, which is scalability. And healthcare at its very core, and I'll lose my primary care card if I don't say this because I do believe it, at its very core is personal. It's one provider, one patient in one location at that moment of time. But when you're talking, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you're talking about a business to buy and grow, you want something that can scale rather quickly. Can you scale a single clinic? Well, sure, but you're going to have to go find more real estate. You're going to have to hire people. It's just a lot harder, a lot more expensive, and a lot slower. I like healthcare businesses that you can put some processes in place and then they exponentially grow because they don't have some of those same constraints to scalability as others do.
And is that, if I don't mind, if you don't mind, I say this, like what on the other side of the coin, what's in it for these small businesses? Like, is it because, is it, if they have hit their scalability where they don't have the capital to grow, do things like, obviously it's you're the peace of mind of you coming in and acquiring them. Yes. But like, what also is sort of like the end game for them? Like, why would they sort of all of a sudden like hand the keys over to the company to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I see, two or three common themes pop up. One of them you mentioned, which is I have kind of hit the ceiling of resources, and I will encompass that by saying financial resources, maybe even experience resources. Like I've done all I can do. I don't know what else to do with this. And so they kind of hit that ceiling and they're like, if I'm going to get to the next phase, I'm going to need a partner. And in many of these businesses, just for clarity, the owner or the seller doesn't totally go away. They will often retain 10, 20% of these businesses and stay in. It's what's called the proverbial second bite of the apple, but just sort of take a step back and let somebody else come in there with some new ideas, with some fresh blood, fresh eyes, and grow the company. The other one is much more personal, which is many of these businesses are founders or longtime owners who are retiring or want to go into, somewhat of a semi-retirement, but they don't want to close down the business. There's really no succession plan. Their adult children don't want it. They don't have employees who want to buy it. And I talk to business owners all the time who think that their only option is to A, continue running it in perpetuity, which they're already so tired and they're not able to enjoy their retirement years because they're still doing it, or B, close it down. I'm like, well, what is this going to do to the employees that I've had for years? Who's going to continue serving these patients or these customers if I shut it down? And so this is a way to preserve and build upon the legacy that they have started. And that's overarchingly the number one concern that I hear, or maybe priority, I should say, that I hear from sellers who want that legacy to continue on. And they want their employees to stay in the community and in a job.
That's great. That's good stuff. Thank you very much for answering that. And if memory serves, I think in the book you write about acquiring 3 different healthcare companies. Might have been more since you published the book, but tell me about like pain points. Is there a common pain point that connects the 3? Or is it just something that like, is it like a child? They're all different. I don't have a favorite. Like, is there one little difficulty that happens that you've seen across, the multiple acquisitions you've had?
The one that I see, and I will kind of call it my favorite pain point, and I say it's my favorite because it's very fixable and usually doesn't cost too much, and that's lack of process. So for example, one of the companies had no CRM. They did sales. They had sales people in the field, but didn't have any kind of CRM, which is a basic business tool. And it wasn't because that the former owner didn't know about a CRM or didn't think it was important. It just wasn't really a priority. It was working. It's like if it's not broken, let's not fix it kind of thing. But until you are able to really get that data on paper and say, where are we doing well? Where are we not doing well? And where do we need to add resources? You're kind of flying blind. And so whether it's a CRM process, even just an expense management process, going from manual to using technology tools, that's why I see these are my favorite pain points, because there's some pretty low hanging fruit. And if you can fix that, you can instantly change the efficiency, and you might add what we call a half turn or a full turn of EBITDA. You might really increase your earnings by doing nothing but streamlining the process. Case in point, one of my companies, has a somewhat of a production process. And on one of the first days, I said, "What's your throughput time?" "I don't know, 2 or 3 days." And so, "Well, how are you measuring that?" "We're not." So we actually measured it, and it was 6 days, 6.1 days. And I thought, not only are we getting this product out very slowly, we're giving our customers bad information because we're kind of guessing. And so when you consolidate all of that down, or distill all of it down into one core theme, it's data. These smaller companies aren't collecting a lot of data, and therefore they aren't able to put the processes in place and make it more efficient. That's my favorite problem to solve because it's pretty cheap to solve.
That's great. That's good. And it's, I say this a lot, whether it's like for entrepreneurs or even intrapreneurs. And I don't know if it's a modern day problem, but I think a lot of us are always surviving, but not thriving. And I think that's for a lot of these small businesses, they're just surviving. I mean, they're probably making decent living, but they're not like thriving to a point where like, they've got all these pain points on lock and just the stuff that happens. But like, you probably see a lot of that, right? With these companies, and especially the ones that you're interested in, because like you said, you're interested in the companies that are already successful. But again, they're probably surviving, not thriving.
That's right. And, when I talk about those kinds of broken processes or lack of processes, I sometimes feel like I'm pointing the finger at the original owner or the seller. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because I'm very sensitive to the fact that organizational change is very difficult. And you've got this large group of employees who you have subscribed to a particular process or workaround, as it were, for a long time. Everybody knows it's not great. Just what you mentioned, they're surviving, they're not thriving, but the pain of change can be worse. And so these sellers and owners will say, I know we need to fix that. I just didn't have the energy to do it. Or, I'm making this up. I'm 63, I'm 64 years old, and I want to retire in a few years. And I'm afraid if I undertake one of those big changes, we could have a big step back in this business, which is a real risk.
Yeah.
And so, like, well, we'll just kind of let it go. It's doing okay for now. And which kind of brings up a related issue when you come in and you buy these businesses and you start fixing some of these long time problems and processes. In every single instance, you'll have attrition, and you will have people that will say, I don't know why you're messing with this, because it was just fine.
Right.
We've been doing it for 15 years this way. Thank you very much. And we're going to continue doing it that way. And then, as the leader, you have to figure out, is this somebody I want to keep on my team or not?
Yeah. And you kind of alluded to earlier, but you're writing the book about, we'll go on the investor side now, buying yourself another job. And you hear this all the time when it comes to people, either even if they're not entrepreneurs starting up the business, they think, like you said, I'm just going to create this thing and it's going to all make money by itself. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, it turns into a job instead of it being like a thing you've created. What ways can folks avoid that? And I guess a lot of it has to probably do with mindset and a delegation. But what have you seen that are ways to avoid buying yourself a job?
Yeah, that is the absolute worst thing you could do in this scenario. And I write about it early in the book. And I say, do you want to be the chief problem solver? Because it's going to be you. And whereas people think about the upside of it and, oh, I'll travel here and I'll do this and I'll set my own hours and I'll set my own compensation. Sure, fine. That's great. And it works most of the time. But when the finances get tight, you don't pay yourself. And when the workload gets too heavy, guess who's staying late and coming in early? Because nobody else is laying awake at night going, is this business going to fail if I don't do this? And so likewise, being the chief problem solver, I don't think, I'll speak for myself. Maybe other people think this way, but I was guilty of saying, well, if they had asked me, I would have done it this way. Or, that I don't know why they didn't think of this other idea. Man, that's different when the buck finally stops with you and you have all of the information and you have to weigh all the pros and cons of these decisions. You find out very quickly that most of the problems that make it to the chief problem solver are very, very difficult. They're gray. They are not black and white, because the black and white problems had already been solved before they got to you. The easy things that didn't require a judgment call, somebody else already handled those. And so it's a different level of accountability and responsibility when this decision that I have to make could make or break this company.
Good stuff. And so for folks who decide to read the book, pick up, follow what you're doing, what do you want them, like, the first thing to do after putting it down? Like, after finishing, is there something actionable? I mean, outside of doing something rash and just buying a company, what's a great starter step for folks who want to sort of follow your footsteps in terms of, this ETA model of acquiring entrepreneurship?
Good question. And I coach people often to write a search thesis. And that, I think people think, well, I'm not doing a search fund, so why do I need a search thesis? Well, you're searching for a business. And even if you're not entirely sure yet, I encourage people to write a search thesis to start seeing what's out there. And the way you write a search thesis is, I'm looking to buy X. What kind of, it'd be specific, a specific kind of services industry, an accounting firm, a professional services firm, a healthcare services business, that kind of thing. I'm looking to buy this in this geography. And, your luck will get bigger or smaller depending on that catchment size. If you're looking in one city, it's going to be pretty hard to find. If you have more of a regional footprint, that's going to be a little bit easier. So I'm looking for X kind of business in Y kind of geography with these financial metrics or any kind of metrics. And you could say 250 employees or more, at least $2 million in EBITDA, a minimum $10 million annual recurring revenue. And so the kind of industry, the geography, and the metrics of it. And then when you start to narrow that focus, then you get a clearer picture of, okay, we might be able to do that, or here's where we would find it. Otherwise, what I see people do is, oh, I'm pretty agnostic. I'll find anything and I'll just look, and if the right thing comes along, I'll know it. And I think that's a really it's that approach is not for me. There are some people who that works for. For me, I like that laser focus, and particularly for those of us who are mid-career, I don't I don't know anything about plumbing and HVAC. I'm sure there are good businesses out there, but I need to be able to use my skill set, my network in order to add value to a business.
That's great. Good stuff. And Lisa, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book. And I would have assumed that you would have dedicated to that basket full of kids or your partner or all the people. No, no, no. You dedicate the book to all the natural born entrepreneurs in my life. Your hustle, authenticity, and grit have inspired me more than you know. Tell me about these natural born entrepreneurs in your life.
They are my children and my parents and my husband, and lots more people. But I sit back and I watch not only my parents and my sister and my uncles and my grandparents before they passed, and I see my children coming up doing the same thing. And like I told you, I was a slow learner. It took me 15 years in corporate America before I realized I was a natural born entrepreneur. But I sit back and I watch these people, my family included, and I say, your grit is getting this done. Your resilience is what's getting you there. You can figure it out. There's going to be bumps on the road. But that's why I dedicated the book to the natural born entrepreneurs in my life, including all those in my family.
Awesome. She's Dr. Lisa Piercey. The book, Natural Born Entrepreneurs, Breaking into Business Ownership. Lisa, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. I enjoyed it.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Lisa and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.